WilloWare's Consulting Toolkit for Microsoft Dynamics GP is a collection of database inquiry and resource discovery tools. It is intended to be used by power users and consultants. The tools are especially useful if you are writing reports, creating smart lists, developing modifications with Dexterity or VBA, or if you're creating SQL queries. Consulting Toolkit is written in Dexterity, so it runs completely within the Dynamics GP client. We're going to look at several of these utilities today. Database Manager is a tool for exploring the SQL Server. Query is a utility for running T-SQL queries against the database. Trace is a utility for looking at the communication between the Dynamics GP client and the database. Finder is a utility for finding information within the database. Resource Explorer is a utility for looking at the Dexterity definitions of tables and windows. And lastly, the View Wizard is a utility for creating SQL views using the Dexterity table definitions. The first tool we're going to look at is Database Manager. All of the Consulting Toolkit tools are located under System Utilities. And it's important to note that unless users are specifically granted access to the Windows and Consulting Toolkit, they won't have the ability to get into these windows. But it is important to closely monitor security because some of these tools allow executing SQL queries directly on the database. The Database Manager utility is a tool for exploring the SQL Server. It shows all of the databases on the server. What's available in the databases list depends on user security. Since we're logged in as SA, we'll see everything, but if we were logged in as lesson user 2, there'd be a number of these databases that we wouldn't have access to. Beneath each database, we can look at stored procedures, tables, and views. And for any of these SQL objects that are displayed in the list view on the right-hand side, selecting the object and clicking Properties will open up a Properties window, or you can just double-click on it. You can see here for a stored procedure, it shows the T-SQL used to create that stored procedure, as well as the input and output parameters. The same is true with the database tables. When you click on Tables, the list view on the right fills with the list of tables in that selected database. You can quickly navigate to any of the tables by typing just the first few letters or numbers of the table name. Double-clicking on the table opens up the Properties window. There's some interesting information here displayed on the table properties. Shows you the total number of records, as well as a measure of the database size. In the list view in the bottom of the window, it will show what the key columns are, as well as the length of the field and the data type. And lastly, the same is true with SQL views. You can quickly get to any of the SQL views by typing in the first few characters. The Properties window shows the SQL query needed to create the view, as well as the columns in the view. For the tables and views, if you have a table selected, you can click the Show button and view the records from that table. Any of this information can be exported out to Excel. And the Excel button is also visible on the Database Manager window, and it will export the information shown in this middle portion of the window. The SQL Query window is a pretty straightforward utility. This window is used for running T-SQL queries against the database. Just like in Database Manager, the list of databases that you have available in the drop-down list depends on user security. Since we're logged on as SA, we have access to all of the databases. If we were logged on as lesson user 1, this list would be restricted to only those databases that lesson user 1 has access to. You can manually type in a query, or you can also save queries and retrieve a saved query. Executing the query shows the results in the bottom portion of the window, and the results can be exported out to Excel. The Database Manager and Query utilities are useful if you already know what you're looking for, but often the first step in writing a report or creating a new Smart List object is to figure out where GP stores the data in the first place. The trace utility is a good tool for figuring out which tables GP is communicating with. And it can be used in a little bit of a detective mode to try to figure out where GP is saving something. So for example, if we wanted to figure out where sales transaction entry is storing the user-defined information, we'd open up sales transaction entry, pull up a transaction, type something into one of these fields, and then start the trace. Now it's important to try to get the window or transaction as close to the location that you want to look for as possible. In this case, we wouldn't have wanted to start the trace before we even open up the sales transaction entry window, because that collects too much information in the trace. It makes it difficult to find what we're looking for. So in this case, we've got the window all set to go. We'll start the trace. We type something into the window here, click OK, and then stop the trace. When we view the trace, we can see now we only have a couple of lines here. And if we look at this one right here, it's inserting into SOP 10106, and we can see our value of test. So we think that SOP 10106 is probably our candidate. We can come over to the query window and run a quick query and see what data is in the table. And we can see down here, here's the value we typed in of tests. Now, a second place that we would want to check is using the Resource Explorer. The Resource Explorer looks at the Dexterity information related to tables and windows in GP. So we know that the physical table name is SOP 10106. We put in that table name, click Find, and we've got a result. And we can see that it is the sales user-defined work history table. Another consulting toolkit utility you can use to try to find information in GP is the Finder utility. Finder searches every database table in the company database for a particular value. You can search for strings, numeric values, and dates. And this also has the ability to retrieve Dexterity table information. This function works very similarly to the Resource Explorer utility. So in this case, let's assume that what we want to try to find is every location in GP where the customer ID is stored. In this case, we know that there's a customer called Aaron Fitz, and part of the customer name is AARON. So the first thing that Finder does is it goes through all of the tables in the company databases and locates the columns that have a string data type. And then it starts searching through all those tables to see if it can find a match. And as you can see in the bottom right hand corner here, it's already found 85 matches. So we'll stop it and take a look at what it found so far. So you can see there's quite a few results in here. And you can go from this window and zoom to the query window, where it'll automatically create a query with the selected record. You can also go from this window and zoom to Resource Explorer to find the Dexterity information about the table that we're looking at. So in this case, it's the cash receipt table. The last utility that we're going to take a look at is the View Wizard. One of the challenges in writing reports against the Dynamics GP database is that the column names in the tables can be rather cryptic. So if we were going to write a report against the item master, it's a little bit difficult to look at these column names and know what the column name means. The benefit of the View Wizard is that it will create a SQL view using these Dexterity column names. So item number will appear as item number. And you can see it suggests a view name. So in this case, we're just going to accept that. Click Create View. It says it's done. So now we'll go back to the query window. And now you see when we select from our view created by the View Wizard, all of these column names appear in plain English. So it's really easy now to read these columns and understand what data is contained in them. And then this view can be used in your report, just like the SQL table would be. Thank you for watching this video overview of the free tools in Consulting Toolkit. If you'd like to learn about all of the other utilities in Consulting Toolkit, or about any of our other software, please visit WilloWare.com or send us an email at sales@willoware.com.